Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of A Better World with Adrienne. I am Adrienne, and I am so excited for this episode. It is a little bit boomy in the room that I am recording in because I almost have my entire place packed up. If you have not heard the news, I am relocating to Maui from Chicago. So if you want to hear that story, go back and listen to the episode called Relentless Intuition, Moving to Maui. And yeah, so I kept my rug down in the space, but I'm like, okay, this is just me just shooting from the hip here and continuing to show up. So if you are new to the space, if you have been here forever, I always love rooting back in our deep intention of this is an unrestricted channel to grow, to heal, to learn, to level up, to connect, to be in a space where other people are spiritual and using their divine gifts to make an impact on the collective, to make an impact on themselves. And yeah, just like the intro says, like when you live your dream, when I live my dream, when we all live our dream, that is when we live in a dream world. That is when we build a better world. That is when we birth a new earth. So that is what we are up to in this community, in this podcast. So today's episode, I'm very, very excited because it's 11 milestones from my Chicago chapter and what they taught me. And basically, I was just really reflecting, I'm packing up my entire home, I'm packing up my entire life, and I'm moving across the world. And I've never lived outside the Midwest. So if you're not, if you don't know the US, the Midwest is just this small pocket of like 3 or 4 states in the middle of the United States. And I grew up in the Midwest. I went to undergrad in the Midwest. I went to grad school in the Midwest, and I have lived in Chicago for the past 8 years. I moved here in 2015. That is crazy, 8 years. And it's a really big deal. It's a really big deal. And I'm closing a major chapter. And, just like we're going to talk about our altar before we begin this podcast. It's so important to do rituals for endings of things. Like there's a reason why we have funerals. There's a reason why we have ceremonies to acknowledge chapters. And so I'm doing this episode to truly acknowledge my chapter in Chicago, to show you what's possible, to share my journey of the major milestones that happened here in this city and what I learned from them. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about today. It's wild. Because I wrote down that I was going to do a Chicago episode, and I was like, oh, well, now's the time to do it because you're leaving in less than a week. Well, not less than a week, about a week. So before we begin, let's talk about the altar. So the altar sets the stage for the magic that gets to occur. And I'm holding my rose quartz crystal. And this has just been helping me with heart coherence and everything. Keeping my heart open, keeping the channel of unconditional love open at every point in the journey. I have a crystal that's usually by my bedside table, but for those of you on YouTube, I will hold it up. It is I saw this crystal in a shop, and then I did a past life regression, and I was in a cave that looked exactly like this. So it's like It's purple amethyst, but like more sparkly, and it has Amazonite in it. So it's very, very powerful, and it looks like a sparkly, like purple cave. I have two things on my altar that are actually on the altar of my body that are brand new. So I have a aquamarine necklace that I was guided to back in the winter. And I said, when I get through this, whatever this spiritual thing is that I'm going through, I'm going to get this stone. And I was told it's for my throat chakra, and I was able to get it yesterday. And I feel so powerful and beautiful in it. And if you want to go back to my episode on the astrology of fashion, I talk all about how clothes and how we adorn our temple unlocks our power. And so I wanted to mention this about the altar for today, because my body's an altar for everything that I do in this life. And so this is brand new that's in the space today. I also am wearing my grandma's engagement ring that I have had sitting in a jewelry box for over 15 years. That might be wrong. It's definitely over 11 years. And I saw it and I went and got it cleaned, and now I'm wearing it. And so I have that as well for the altar today. And then finally, the flowers on the altar. I did my last Saturday flower ritual, my sacred Saturday flower ritual, where I get fresh flowers for my apartment every Saturday. Did the last one this week in Chicago. This will continue. And it's all roses. It is all roses, and we have yellow roses. We have white roses. So yellow is for power, for the solar plexus. We have white roses for purity and clarity. We have like a fuchsia orange rose. It's for the sacral chakra, for creativity, for the inner child, because it is Leo season when I'm recording this. And by the way, I'm a Leo sun. And then we have some red mini roses. And I'm like smelling the roses, smelling flowers each time I talk about one. So we have so much energy and blessings available to us from spirit and all of these entities in the 3D plane. And I do have my blue stones as well for our throat chakras. And of course, the aquamarine that's literally sitting right near my throat chakra for us. So before we begin, if you're new here, these are straight up transmissions, yo. So we have our altar, and now we take 3 deep breaths together to connect our energy for mind, body, spirit to open the space. So inhale through the nose. Let the divine white light cover your entire body. Feel the feet beneath your body, touching Mother Earth. Exhale out the mouth. Inhale this time. Open up your ears to allow the messages and the codes to enter your sacred vessel with joy, with openness, with reverence. Exhale out the mouth. Finally, one last inhale. And this one is all the colors. Yellow for power, white for purity, orange for creativity, red for love. And a pink light surrounds you, covering you in unconditional love. Keep holding the breath at the top because you can. Open your crown chakra. Exhale out the mouth. Gently open your eyes. Shake out your body. I'm like, was that 2 breaths or 3 breaths? I honestly don't know because I was totally with the flowers in my brain. Okay. I'm excited for this episode and 11 milestones for my Chicago chapter and what they taught me. So this is a very deeply important episode because it's going to showcase the power of reflection. It's going to showcase the power of looking back on your life. And it's not about, we just stay in a loop constantly looking towards the past. Like for me, I'm someone who I intentionally create time to reflect and pause and say thank you because I'm rip roaring ready to go to the next thing. And I even noticed myself doing that a little bit last week where I was like, oh my gosh, there's all this astrology and I'm moving and I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G and blah, 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 blah. And then I noticed my energy dwindling and, I mentioned in the podcast about, the story behind Maui is like healing burnout and overwork. And I was like, you know what? You're doing a lot. You can rest. You can take some time to just soak up this moment. Like it's literally your last week as a Chicagoan. And so it's deeply important to reflect on our chapters. And then it's important to just look back and see how far we've come. Because here's the thing, I guarantee you that the life you're living today is a life that you once dreamed about in some way. Especially if you're here in this podcast, in this world, if you're vibrating on the frequency that I'm vibrating on, you're a new earth leader, whether you've put it into motion or not yet, whether you've acted on it or not. And, it really is like when I think about my life now, this is shit that I used to dream and pray for this house, for the business that I've built, for the relationship with myself that I have, for the friends I have, for the community I have, and the resources that I've created. And so, yeah, I just feel really called to say thank you to Spirit, God Source Energy, for the opportunity to channel and for my whole journey. So, and I share this on the podcast as an example for you, as a way for you to learn and heal and grow and all the things. So 11 milestones from my Chicago chapter and what they taught me. And they're in no particular order, I guess. The first one, moving here with no money and no job. That was the first milestone. The first milestone was the decision to do it. Okay. And so just to paint a little picture, when I moved here in 2015, I was still in the throes of my patterns with alcohol, with deep substance abuse of alcohol and drugs. And I like to say I was addicted to drugs and toxic men because I was deep in substance abuse, like all the time, and always with men that would treat me horrendously. And yeah, I was deep in that pattern. I had just finished my master's at one of the toughest music schools in the world. And I was like, you know what? If I want to make it, oh, it's 333, by the way, when I'm recording this. If I want to make it as a musician, if I want to make it as a performer, I got to move to a big city. And I literally didn't know anyone in Chicago except for one person. I knew one person in Chicago. I didn't have a job lined up. And I put all my money down on first and last month's rent in this shitty apartment that when I mean, it was a pretty nice apartment, but like when my parents moved me in, I remember my dad being like, you know, that's a bullet hole in the window, right? And I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. But it was what I could afford at the time. And I'll never forget I had a roommate and my part of the rent was $650. And I remember I moved in, I had no job lined up, and I had 300 bucks in my bank account. And my parents don't even know that because, you know, they already were concerned about me moving here. And I wasn't about to be like, oh yeah, I have no money. um, and I made it happen, but I'll never forget the $650. It was like, I was like, that's a lot of fucking money. How am I gonna pay that? Because I was coming from Bloomington, Indiana, where I literally paid $250 a month for rent, which is like, I'm like, that's a less than my car payment was. Like, holy shit. But anyways, the first big milestone was moving here with no money, no job, and just making it happen. And so what did I learn from that? I decided that I wanted to move to Chicago. I decided that I was going to make it happen. I decided that I would just figure it out. And guess what? I did. So the lesson from that was bet on yourself, follow your heart. Don't let logic win at the end of the day. Let your heart lead you and know that you can figure things out as they present themselves. Know that you can figure things out no matter what. And so like these past 6 months, as I've been going through my journey towards moving to Maui, like this is something I came back to many times. I was like, dude, you moved to Chicago with 300 bucks and no job and no contacts, and you made it happen, and you built an amazing life for yourself. If you can do that, you can do this. And so that's what I learned. Like the decision moving here, moving to Chicago with no money and no job and no contacts taught me the power of just making a decision. You just decide that it's happening, and then it does. You don't need to worry about how long it's going to take. You don't need to worry about every single detail of how to step in advance. Just make a move, make a move, make a move after move after move. So I learned the power of a bold decision, the power of following through on that bold decision, and the power of betting on myself against all odds. I'll never forget the look on my dad's face when he saw that. And I'll never forget when they drove away and they were like, what is our kid doing? And I was like, I know exactly what I'm doing. And it's like one of those things where when you're younger, you have this level of faith and drive that I feel like once you experience more of life, you get a little bit more jaded. But luckily, I feel like not luckily, I've stayed tapped into that because I mean, you must as an entrepreneur. So first milestone was moving here with no money or no job, betting on myself, the decision, and the power of just going for it. So the second major milestone from my Chicago chapter was falling in love. And a lot of people, you know, they don't talk about this when it comes to like new earth and business and manifesting and all of that stuff. But like my first boyfriend I ever had from age 18 to 23, I finally left him when I was in the middle of my master's, was incredibly abusive. And trigger warning, he was incredibly abusive in every way you can think of. Emotionally, physically, verbally, sexually. Like he was abusive. And so in my first 6 months living in Chicago, I fell in love with someone and I experienced real unconditional love for the first time in my life. I experienced what it was like to, and just the fact that I was able to fall in love, like, was a major milestone for me. And so it taught me about, it healed my heart. It healed my heart from those years of abuse. I began my healing journey. I was like, oh, like I can have a sex life that has pleasure in it. I never had that before. And, I just, there's so much I could say about it, but falling in love for the first time in my life happened here in Chicago. And that was a major, major milestone for me about vulnerability. And I learned a lot about communicating. I learned a lot about what it means to cherish and be cherished. And that was just huge and massive. And just even the way that I met this person was so karmic, and he and I did 300 lifetimes together. And the way I met him was actually, the brakes went out on my car and I avoided an intersection and smashed into a fire hydrant in front of a diner. And it was here just in my current neighborhood still. And I went inside to use the phone and wait for the cops to come. And he was sitting there with his dad. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. That guy's hot. Today already sucks because I just totaled my car. I was like, I'm going to ask that guy out. It doesn't matter what he says. And he said yes. And the rest was history. But falling in love with him, I highly, highly doubt he would ever listen to this podcast. But if he ever did listen, I think he already knows this, but falling in love with him helped me fall in love with myself after years of abusive, toxic relationships with others and myself. Because, here's the thing. We can't have a toxic relationship with someone else if we don't have a toxic one with ourselves. Even if it's not our fault, even if it's just what we're used to, even if we don't even realize it's what's happening, we can only have a toxic relationship with another if there's some level of toxic relationship within us. And so I really learned love in all forms in that relationship and falling in love. So I'm just smiling so big talking about it. I feel so grateful. Okay. The third milestone from my Chicago chapter was then leaving that same person, leaving them and going through my breakup. So it was a mind fuck, and I talk about it in my episode, Relentless Intuition, but it was me realizing, hey, I love this person unconditionally. I don't want to leave. Like this is so deeply, deeply, excruciatingly painful. And at the same time, I know that I'm supposed to leave. I'm not going to get into any of these specifics on this podcast because, there's other people involved, and, it's just not right. In my opinion, it doesn't need to be shared in any way, but I really, that shattered me. That shattered me, and it shattered me open to the next level of my evolution. Because even throughout that relationship, I was still drinking, and I was drinking less, but not stopped by any means. So leaving him and deciding to move out, like, we lived together, our finances were entangled, like, I thought, he is the one. And then it was like, oh wait, ping, ping, ping for my intuition, like, oh, he's not the one. So it was a major milestone of me following my intuition for the first time. That was the lesson there, following my intuition for the first time. And then I can't even tell you how many lessons I learned in that breakup, but it was just like me sleeping on my friends' couches for months and crying myself to sleep for months. Like it was like excruciating pain. And that's when I really started unlocking my spirituality. That's when I really started, like, truly loving myself, just me on my own, with no substance, with no, I mean, not at first. I definitely abused substance in the beginning of that breakup to numb my pain. So it was just a very, I would say, what did I learn the most from leaving him and going through that whole breakup was my own strength. I learned the power of listening to my intuition no matter what. I learned that it's worth it. I learned that it's worth it to love that deep. It's worth it to love that deep when it's just worth it. I would do it all again, and it was the right decision. And I learned about myself even deeper. I learned about, my tenacity, like when I think back on that time, I'm like, how did you do it, girl? How did you do it? That's powerful, like not having a home as a direct result of following my intuition. That was fucking hard. Leaving the person that I thought was the love of my life, that was fucking hard. So I learned a lot of strength. I learned about my intuition. I learned about my own patterns with partners because I started going to therapy. We had been in couples therapy, but I continued on therapy on my own. And it was the first time I had been in therapy since I was about 18. And a lot had happened between 18 and 27. So yeah, I really started to unpack a lot of that. And yeah, it just taught me the power of trusting myself and following through on that, and the power of going toe to toe with myself. Because I showed up every single week in therapy. I showed up, I kept going, even when it was horrible. Oh my God. I think back on that version of me and it makes me emotional and it makes me proud. So if you're listening to this and you're going through something hard, just know that one day you're going to look back on that and do the thing that's going to make you the most proud. Okay. All right. The fourth milestone from my Chicago chapter was winning my dream job at 27. So it was actually amidst this breakup, crazy enough. Because that's another thing that I did when I decided on, leaving that relationship. I knew it was going to be awful. I knew I wasn't going to have a home. I knew that I was going to be paying. I knew that I didn't have the financial independence or freedom to just be able to like fix everything, you know, like I couldn't go just like immediately sign some new apartment. Like I was not in the space to do that. So, but I did decide, I said, you know, this part of my life's going to fall apart. Everything else isn't though. And I said, I'm going all in on my dream for winning an orchestra job. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and being like, one day you're going to talk about this. One day you're going to talk about how you created magic amidst a mess. And I did. So I won. Let's see, I broke up with that person in January. That following March, which was only 3 months later. Yeah, it was in March. I won a world-renowned job, one of 5 positions in the world, playing my French horn with the United States Navy. And it was actually the first job. So for any musicians that are listening, it was the first audition that I ever advanced in at all. And then I won it. So I went from like 0 to 100. I went from taking literally over 40 auditions where I never advanced ever, to then I went and advanced and won the thing. And so that was really amazing. And, you know, for people that aren't in classical music, like there are these things called excerpts, and they're tiny snippets of music, orchestra music that's been played for centuries and is played in a very specific, acceptable way. And basically they're clips of like 30 seconds or less that you practice over and over and over and over and over. And you go to these auditions and you get like 30 seconds. They'll ask like 3 or 4 clips, but that's all you get. And you're behind a screen, they can't see who you are. And so it's very, very high pressure. People don't know this, but orchestral musicians are similar, like high stress job situation to an air traffic controller. They've done research on that. So it's because perfection is expected. And you know, I have an interesting lens on the word perfection, which I won't get into today. I really view it as a verb, not something that's attained. But anyways, I won this dream job at 27, okay? And I was like, I couldn't have been more proud. It was like, this is the crazy thing, is that I was manifesting before I even knew what manifestation was, right? Because everybody's always manifesting. But I remember like 5 years before that, I was talking to my teacher, Odo, and he was like, oh yeah, I won my job with the Chicago Symphony when I was 27. I remember I didn't even write it down in a journal. I just remember in my mind, I'm like, oh, if he can do it by 27, I can do it by 27. And guess how old I was when I won this job? 27. And the thing is, I knew it when I saw this job listed, because when I saw the listing, I had already decided I was going to excel in my career during my breakup. And I was like, oh, and I'll be 27 during that audition. So this goes back to the other example of like just deciding. I decided in advance that I was going to do it. Okay. So what did I learn from winning my dream job at 27? First of all, I learned that I could do it. I could do the thing that teachers and mentors and people in the music space had told me that I couldn't do for so long. They didn't really outright say it, but the rhetoric and the culture in the space is barely anybody wins a job. You better have a backup. And, you know, from a manifestation perspective, I think that's really, really fucked up. And there's a lot of fucked up there, but I did what most people do not do. And so I proved to myself, you can do it. And then what did I learn? As soon as I won the job, I was faced with situations that brought forth my intuition, and now I know it was divine intervention. And I started questioning everything. I was like, okay, now that I won this thing, I didn't want to not play in an orchestra because I couldn't win a job. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, right? That I could win an audition. Okay, I checked the box off. And then at that point, I started wondering if the dream was even mine. I was like, oh, wow, is this even my dream? And so that is a whole story in itself of like how that transpired. But yeah. So the biggest lesson from, I mean, it's obvious that wasn't my full dream. And so the biggest lesson it taught me was just because you can do it doesn't mean it's your dream. It was very, very powerful though. And I know a lot of people that have done this is like, I just want to show myself I can do it. And if I walk away, it's not going to be because I can't do it. It's going to be because I chose not to do it. And so there was a lot of power in that decision. And I also learned, I remember there was a very specific moment the night after I won the audition, and I was writing in my gratitude journal, because at that time I would write down 3 things I was grateful for before I went to bed. And I remember writing down, I'm grateful for my dream job in the Navy. And you know, the craziest thing about all of that is the place where I was going to be stationed was going to be Hawaii. So look, your girl's still going to go to Hawaii. I'm going to make more money and I'm going to be free doing it. I remember writing, I'm so grateful for this job. And then next to it, the very next thing was, I'm grateful for my warm socks. And it really just brought it down off the pedestal. Because it was like, yeah, I won this pinnacle job. I'm still the same person. Because there's total, and it's something that I had read about in books for so long. It's like, when you get the thing, when you get the dream, like, you think everything's going to be different, but it's not. You're still you. And that's exactly what happened. I was like, oh, yep, I'm still me. I'm still Adrienne from Michigan. I still have my wool socks. I still have A, B, C, D, E. And yeah, so the biggest thing I learned was like, just my power to do things, my power to choose. And you know, just because it's been a dream, like reflect on if something is actually your dream. And then it's not going to change who you are. It's not going to change fundamentally. Like, it's like chasing the carrot, right? And so, you know, I still was going through a breakup. I still had a broken heart. I still had all those things, even though I had just won my dream job. So, okay. Number 5, quitting drugs and alcohol. This was a major, major milestone for me. And this was a self-love journey. This was a self-respect journey. I learned about the power of asking for help. I learned about the power of clarity. And that was a major, major milestone for me. I did it with tons of help. I did it with tons of meditation. I did it with tons of healing over time. And so what it really taught me was love and motion for myself. And it really taught me a lot of compassion for others. It really taught me, you know, I think one of the reasons why I'm such an amazing healer and coach is because I have been in the trenches. I have been through sexual trauma. I have been through addiction. I have, for over 10 years of my life, would numb out, to black out, to not remembering, just to avoid my own feelings and demons. So, you know, when I hold space for my clients, I can go to the trenches with them because I've gone to the trenches with me. And so quitting all of that stuff was massive. And like the level of clarity and happiness and joy and bliss that I have experienced because I don't numb, that's what I learned. Wow, I'm getting emotional. Woo! Number 6, healing my sexual trauma. So something that happened when I started doing breath work was that all my sexual trauma came up in my body, and I didn't even realize. I just remember thinking like, oh, I dated an asshole, but I never thought of it as sexual trauma. And I never thought of, I had a situation in college at a frat house, and I never thought about it as like sexual trauma, but it all was. And when I started going into therapy and doing breath work, I really discovered how deeply it was stored in the cells of my body, and how much it was running my life. And so healing that was a major, major milestone. And it's not like we're ever fully healed, but like, you may have heard the story before of like, I did daily breath work for a year. And about halfway through that, like I had a very spiritual experience where my menstrual cycle restarted during breath work. And I felt a very healing, cooling energy over my womb space. And I knew that I had released it out of my uterus. And it was so deeply powerful. And that was a major, major milestone. And so what that taught me was the power of consistency through healing and the power of breath work. Because honestly, talk therapy did not heal my sexual trauma. I talked about things a lot. I had a safe space to cry. It did not heal my sexual trauma because it was still stored in the cells of my body. It wasn't until I did consistent breath work journeys of deep integrity, and I aligned it with the energies of the universe, that it healed my trauma, that it healed my life, my soul. And so what did I learn from that? The power of breath work. There's a reason why I became a breathwork facilitator, because it changed my fucking life. And that's it right there. Now, did it change my life in other ways? Yes, with money, with power, with everything, with manifesting, but this was the big thing. This was the big thing. Okay. Ooh, I'm getting emotional. 7, taking responsibility and healing my money. So I finally healed my money while I was living in Chicago. And, when I think about all these milestones that happened on the landscape of the city. And so I'm so grateful for this place. And, I remember listening to the audio book of You Are a Badass at Making Money. And I remember asking for my first raise. And I remember joining the House of Wealth Embodiment with Victoria Washington. And I remember being in Natalia Benson's Magical Women in Money membership, and like managing my money and setting up my accounts and setting up my business accounts. And this was a major, major milestone. And so what it taught me was sacred responsibility. And, I used to think, especially raised in the Midwest and especially raised as a musician, I was raised with the starving artist paradigm. I was raised with a bunch of programming that having money makes you bad, that good people aren't wealthy, that you can either be a good artist or make money. You can't do both, like all this bullshit. And so what I learned from healing my money was money's the root of all love. when I'm fully resourced, I can be generous with others. The more income I have, the more impact I make. And, it taught me all about money being holy. I heard someone just say yesterday on a podcast, I'm forgetting who it was, but they said it's unholy for me to not make money. It's unholy. And that's what I learned. So number 8, starting and building my business was a major. And so, this is a celebration episode. This is a reflection and celebration episode and just learning. So starting and building my business. I started my business 2 weeks before COVID. I can't even tell you, it doesn't matter when you start a business. When you start a business, you're raising your hand for your soul's evolution. You're raising your hand to grow, okay? To grow exponentially and to grow in front of people. There's that one thing to be said for like, yes, I'm going to therapy. I'm going to this private session. It's another thing to be like, I'm so here's my gifts. Give me money for my gifts. So, and then do that during COVID. This is fucking spiritual Olympics right there. So what did I learn from starting and building my business? Oh my gosh, I learned strategy. I learned joy. I learned faith. I learned tenacity. I learned how to package things. I learned creativity. I learned, my unique magic and how I want to share it. I learned all about leadership. Like, I invested in courses. I invested in coaches. Like, I learned the power of investing in myself. And the thing is, I've always invested in myself. I've always invested in mentors. I've always had mentors since I was 4, especially as a musician. And like, even when I was in college, when I was broke, like I would babysit. I painted my teacher's lawn. I would house sit. I would do, projects. I painted one of my teacher's porches in like 90 degrees in August. Like I would do anything to get mentorship. And so it's so interesting to me when I meet people that it's a lost art. Mentorship and coaching and having teachers is, I believe, a lost art in our current world. But what did I learn from starting in my business, this major milestone? Everything from money to impact to spirituality, like taught me about trust. It taught me about trust, and it taught me about the long game. Because a lot of people view me as an overnight success, but it's like the ideas I was formulating that, I started mindful music in 2020, but I started formulating those ideas and frameworks and the modality itself back in 2016. And then so my business is still really young. And then the part of my business that's breath work is only a year and a half old, which is crazy. But again, I've been in spirituality and all of that immersion and study for over a decade. And I've been coaching people for 15 plus years. So yeah, all of that I learned. Okay, I'm going to keep it moving. I'm getting a little wordy here. Okay, number 9, going to Europe alone. Going to Europe alone taught me, that was a major milestone. Remember, I grew up in the Midwest. We didn't grow up traveling. My parents have never been to Europe. So when I went there by myself, it was huge. I learned about being in other cultures. I learned about figuring things out on my own. I learned about, being a minority. I learned about other languages. you learn so much when you travel. You learn so much when you travel. It's humbling. It's humbling the beauty that you get to see. It's humbling the people that you meet. It's humbling that, like, we are one. And so what did I learn from that? I learned that, and it also squashed a lot of fear I had, because I had a lot of fear about traveling alone as a woman. And it really opened up this whole other part of life for me that, I'm so happy and joyful when I'm traveling, and I love solo travel. I love going places on my own and just having fun and meeting people, and like, I just love it. I just love it. So that part of my life never would have been unlocked if I hadn't gone to Europe by myself in 2019. And, that's also when I reconnected with the water in Croatia. So yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful milestone and lesson for me. Okay, number 10, rebuilding my relationship with my parents. This is something I'm so proud of that happened when I was in Chicago. Is, just based on my story, you can see, like, there's two major things that happen. First of all, again, like, I'm not going to go into a bunch of details, but when you realize that your parents are just humans that are also imperfect, it really opens things up. So I think that's something that all of us get to go through in our journey, is like taking our parents off the pedestal of being parents and like, hey, they're fellow humans. And that opens up a pathway of healing. Now, I would not have been able to rebuild my relationship with my parents if I had not healed my relationship with substances and healed my relationship with spirituality. So, yeah, that's a major, major milestone that I'm really, really proud of, because there was a time where my parents and I didn't speak, and it was so painful and it was so challenging for me. And so what I really learned through that rebuilding process was just like the power of open communication, the power of boundaries, because, boundaries matter no matter what kind of relationship it is, no matter who it is. And, boundaries make a container safe to open up into, it's just like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example. Like, I feel safe in my house because there's walls and a floor, I can relax in here. And so the same in the relationship. So I learned the power of boundaries. I learned the power of loving, open communication. I learned non-judgment. I learned, that it's that Ram Dass quote, like, you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. Like, nobody triggers us like our family. Nobody triggers us like our parents, because it's literally our blood. And when we bring it down to the nervous system, it makes sense of why. And so I learned so much through that, and I'm so deeply grateful for that. So, I mean, I know my mom listens to this podcast sometimes. So if you're listening, Mom, I love you and I'm proud of us, and I'm so glad and grateful for our relationship. And finally, number 11, my 11th milestone from my Chicago chapter. And, there's so much more, but these were the first ones that came through, was, healing my spirituality, fully committing to my spiritual path and becoming a shaman. So I grew up in the church, and I had a really fucked up things happened, like I had so much faith and belief as a little girl, and then all these things happened and I lost my faith, and I rejected God source energy. I rejected spirituality. I rejected that part of me, because I was like, you know what, if all of this means I have to hate gay people and think that women are less than, and A, B, C, D, E, be a hypocrite in all these ways, then I don't want any part in it. And so I rejected spirituality fully. And, then I went on my dark journey of like alcohol, like partying, near-death experience, like toxic men, like all of these things, which I really believe substances, people are trying to tap into the thing that holds us all together, but it's just in a really, really incredibly toxic way. So during my time here in Chicago, I started meditating every single day. I started going to yoga. I did yoga teacher training. I was always into personal development just because I wanted to win auditions. And I've always been into high performance. And so, but this was different. And then I discovered breath work. And then guess what? I even went to church a few times with my good friend Jinty, if she's listening. And I reunited with the deep, deep part of me, my inner child that sang in church and always believed. And I healed my relationship with even the word God, because I couldn't even say that word for so long. And so what did it teach me? Taught me magic. It taught me the power of the universe, of angels, that my psychic gifts are real, that everything that I felt and knew as a little girl was real. And then I just learned how to expand it, and not expand it with just me, just expand it because I'm a child of the universe, and allow God source energy to pulse through me and be part of something bigger, and claim my leadership as a leader of a new earth. And, becoming a shaman, I had no idea that was going to change my life so radically. I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be like breath work, my breath work teacher training, because, up till then I had, my meditation training, my asana training, my breathwork journey training. And I was like, oh yeah, now I'm going to become a shaman. I'm like, oh wait, everything's different now. So yeah, I mean, what did I learn from that? Just homecoming, deep, deep, deep trust and love. So much love for the creator, and for Mother Nature, like just reconnecting with all of that. So I feel emotional. These are the 11 milestones for my Chicago chapter and what they taught me. And like, I am so proud of the version of me that said, fuck it. And I'm going to move there with no job and $300 and with a horn on my back and with a dream in my heart. And I'm going to make it real. And guess what? I did. And I'm so proud of her. And I'm so grateful to every single version of me that walked the streets of Chicago, that just, this city built me. I built myself in this city, and this city built me. It's both. And I really hold the belief that like the places that we live on the earth they happen for a reason. And so this was a very sacred part of my journey. Like, I learned grit in this city. I learned, hard work. I learned how to take public transit and all that stuff as a kid who was raised on a farm. I'm powerful, and I learned how to thrive in one of the biggest cities on the globe. And I'm so proud of that. And I'm just so grateful to Chicago. Like, thank you, Chicago. Thank you for everything you did for me. Like, every synchronicity, like every place that I got to play my horn, I'm going to start crying. Every place I got to play my horn, every human I got to interact with. Thank you for everything you did for me building mindful music, for just holding my soul and my spirit, for holding me when I was going through my breakup, for when I was winning my job, healing my trauma, like everything with falling in love, building my business, like everything, just everything. And so to you, dear listener, I just hope this is an inspiration for like you to really acknowledge the place that you live, for you to really take the time to acknowledge the end of a chapter, because it's really, really easy to rush through it. And the ending of a chapter is just as important as the beginning. It's just like the dark moon phase, right? A time of reflection, a time of letting go before you start again. And so, I am ready to let go of Chicago, and I'm ready to move forward. And I'm just like so deeply grateful to this city. And just think about that. That was 8 years ago. I did a lot of shit in 8 years. I did a lot of fucking shit in 8 years. And I'm so proud of that. And this was the landscape for all of it. So yeah, I would love to hear from you about this episode. Like, which one resonated with you the most? Like, which lesson, which milestone, like what stuck out to you? And if you've been a longtime listener of the podcast and you haven't written a review yet, like, please take the time to write a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the podcast. Like, I'm really focusing on pouring into this space. And I dropped my first ever bonus episode last week on Mars and Virgo that I'm really excited about. So yeah, I'm really going to be pouring in a lot here. So here's to the end of a chapter. Here's to all the milestones that were created here. And, here's to the next chapter. Like, here is to the next chapter. And I just want you to know, like, if there's something you want to do it. Like, this whole move to Maui is really reminding me of that part of me that just moved to Chicago with no plan. No plan other than I'm doing it. And that's all you need. That's all you need. So if you have a dream in your heart, do it. Like, too many people don't do the thing they want to do. And then imagine if I hadn't moved here, okay? Imagine if I had moved home to Michigan, like a lot of people told me I should. Stay in my comfort zone. Here's the thing. The only thing that lives in comfort zone is regret and broken dreams. Don't let that happen. Go for it. Go for it. So thank you, Chicago. Thank you to this community. Yeah, tag me in your Instagram stories. Let me know your biggest takeaway. Please write a review if you desire. And if you are interested in working with me, if you want to move through some of these big milestones yourself, like, I mean, I didn't even talk about this for my business, but like, I built my business from scratch to, multiple 5-figure monthly revenue. Like, that's fucking epic as a spiritual business. So if you want to achieve milestones like this through the lens of spirituality, through the lens of healing, through the lens of your leadership as a new earth leader, I'm accepting new one-on-one mentorship clients to begin with me in the end of August or beginning of September. So if this is you, if you are interested, go to the link in the show notes and apply. There are very limited spaces available. So, if you feel the call in your soul, like just like I did when I was moving to Chicago, just do it. Just do it. If you know it's right, just do it and everything will fall into place. And you get to have help along the way. So this is the end of this episode. This is my, bon voyage to Chicago. I hope this served you. I can't wait to see how this landed, And I really invite you to reflect on your milestones. Maybe it's from the past year, maybe it's from, what you've achieved since you've been living where you're living, or anything like that. But these moments are just as important as the endings, are just as important as the beginnings. And they might be even more important, because when we reflect on them, then we gain insights about ourselves that we get to take into the next part. So thank you, Chicago. Thank you to all the places that all the people in this community live. Thank you to all versions of myself for how we did this thing. And, thank you to you, dear listener. I honor you. I see you. And yeah, go out there, be the light, be the change, celebrate your own milestones, and go make new ones. Love yourself more. Remember, your ideas are unique, they matter, and are an important part of a new earth. So go out there, be the light. Do a surprise for a stranger that makes them smile big. Share your gifts. I love you so much. And I will see you next time on A Better World with Adrienne.